My family dumped me at a temporary relief shelter in the middle of a swirling snowstorm on Christmas Eve. They told me it was an emergency purely for my own safety. They told me the ancient boiler in the basement had failed catastrophically and the carbon monoxide levels were lethal. But as I stood on the freezing, cracked asphalt, watching my only son's crimson taillights vanish into the white curtain of the night, I didn't know that in exactly 12 hours, the entire balance of power was going to shift in a way none of us could have ever predicted. Because tucked deep inside the inner pocket of my old tweed overcoat was a crumpled piece of paper worth $12 million. And I was about to make them pay, with interest, for every single second I spent shivering in the snow. Before I tell you how I executed the most perfect act of vengeance with a smile on my face, please tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this story from. Like and subscribe if you believe that karma is not just a concept, but a meticulous accountant that always finds the people who deserve its most severe balancing. There was no holiday cheer playing in the car. There was no warmth, literally or metaphorically. The heating system in Victor's large, black SUV had been blowing cold air for the last 25 minutes. Or maybe it just felt that way because of the heavy, suffocating silence. I sat stiffly in the back seat, my knees pressed against the cold leather, watching the back of my son's head. Victor was gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white islands in the dim glow of the dashboard. Next to him, my daughter-in-law Serena was scrolling through her phone, the blue-white light illuminating a face that hadn't offered me a sincere smile in over 4 years. I shivered, pulling my thin, threadbare coat tighter around my 67-year-old frame. "Victor, is the heat on?" I asked, my voice sounding smaller than I intended, a reedy sound that barely cut through the wind noise. Victor didn't answer. He didn't even look in the rearview mirror. He just kept his eyes fixed on the road, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the heavy, wet snow that was rapidly burying Toronto. It was Serena who finally answered without turning around. "The SUV is overdue for servicing, Arthur. We just haven't had the money to fix the expensive components yet. Maybe if you contributed a bit more from your retirement fund, we could afford basic maintenance." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. My retirement fund, the pension that I had been handing over to them almost in its entirety for the last 18 months, ever since Victor's architectural firm collapsed under a mountain of debt. I wanted to remind her that I had paid off the mortgage on the sprawling house they were sleeping in. I wanted to remind her that I, a retired civil engineer, had built that house with my own 2 hands 42 years ago, laying every foundation block, installing every single copper pipe. But I said nothing. I learned a long time ago that silence was the only strategy left to survive in my own home. The car began to slow down. I peered out the window, expecting to see a welcoming hotel or perhaps the house of some distant relative, but we were in a part of town I never visited. The streetlights were flickering, many were broken, and the old brick buildings were covered in harsh, faded graffiti that the snow was mercifully beginning to hide. Victor pulled up to the curb in front of a grim, concrete 3-story structure. A faded, peeling sign above the metal entry door read, "The St. Gregory Relief Center." I felt a cold, leaden pit form deep in my stomach. "Victor, why are we stopping here?" I asked, the anxiety making my voice tremble. The car stopped. The engine idled, vibrating faintly against my seat. Finally, Victor turned around. He couldn't quite look me in the eye. He looked at my chin, then at my shoulder, anywhere but my face. "Dad, we have to do this. It's an emergency. Please try to understand." Serena spun around in her seat, her patience clearly gone, replaced by sharp annoyance. "Look, Arthur, the boiler at the house just gave out. The repair technician came while you were napping. He said there is a carbon monoxide leak in the ventilation. It is lethal. We cannot stay there tonight. We're going to stay with my parents in the suburbs, but they do not have room for you. They only have one guest suite, and our son Ryan needs to sleep on the sofa. This is the only place that had a bed open on Christmas Eve. It's just for one night." I looked at the ugly building again. A line of men were huddled by the metal door, stomping their feet, trying to generate a semblance of warmth. A shelter. My son was dropping me off at a homeless shelter. But Victor, surely there's a cheap motel, I stammered, fumbling inside my coat pocket. I have a little cash. I can pay for a room. We do not have time to drive around looking for a motel, Arthur. Serena snapped, her voice rising in panic. The roads are getting worse. Do you want us to crash? It is just for one night. The technician is coming back tomorrow morning. We will come pick you up by noon. Now get out. We are freezing and we are late. The electronic door locks clicked open. I opened the door and the brutal, sub-zero wind hit me like a physical blow. I stepped out onto the icy sidewalk, my old boots slipping slightly on the glaze. Before I could even close the door, I saw the trunk pop open. Victor got out, walked to the back, and pulled out my largest suitcase. It wasn't my small overnight bag. It was my massive hardshell luggage, the one I used for long trips to visit my late brother overseas. He set it down on the wet, filthy pavement with a heavy thud. I looked at the suitcase, then at him. Victor, why did you pack the big case if it is only for one night? He flinched. He looked like he was about to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe the truth. But Serena honked the horn, one long, impatient blast. Victor jumped. He looked at me one last time, his eyes watery and red, and whispered, "Stay safe, Dad. Stay warm." Then he got back in the car. I stood there as the SUV pulled away, the crimson taillights disappearing into the swirling white snow. I was 67 years old. I was a respected, retired engineer. I had raised that boy alone after his mother died, and he had just left me on a frozen curb with a suitcase that contained, I realized with a sudden sinking, crushing heart, everything I owned. This wasn't for one night. They weren't coming back tomorrow. I dragged my massive suitcase toward the metal doors of St. Gregory's. My hands were already numb with cold. Inside, the air was thick and heavy. It smelled intensely of industrial bleach, stale cigarette smoke, wet wool, and the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies. It was the smell of hopelessness, concentrated. A large woman with tired eyes sat behind a thick plexiglass window. She looked at me, then at my huge suitcase, then back at me. "Name?" she asked, her pen hovering over a clipboard. "Arthur Wallace," I said. My voice shook with residual cold and shock. "Date of birth, August 13th, 1958. She wrote it down without expression. "Any weapons, illegal drugs, or alcohol? We will search the bags." "No," I said firmly. "I'm just here because my house has a severe gas leak. My son dropped me off." The woman stopped writing. She looked up at me, really looked at me this time. Her eyes softened just a fraction, a brief flash of sympathy in the vast desert of her professionalism. "A gas leak on Christmas Eve," she repeated flatly. "Honey, we hear a lot of stories in here. That's definitely a new one." She pushed a small slip of paper toward me. "Bed 41, second floor. Lights out at 10 o'clock. Do not lose your ticket or you do not eat breakfast." I took the ticket. I walked through a metal detector that beeped harshly at my belt buckle. I had to surrender my small pocket knife, the one my late father gave me when I was 10 years old. I felt stripped. I felt naked, exposed. I found bed 41. It was a narrow, canvas cot with a thin, unforgiving mattress and a rough, gray wool blanket. To my left, a man was coughing a wet, rattling, horrible sound that seemed to scrape against the cold steel walls. To my right, a younger man was sitting upright, rocking back and forth, muttering urgently to someone only he could see. I sat gingerly on the edge of the cot. I needed to know the truth. The cold, calculating logic of the engineer in me couldn't let go of the inconsistency. A boiler failure leading to carbon monoxide? It was possible, but why the massive long-trip suitcase? And why did Serena look so annoyed rather than genuinely scared? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an older model, the screen cracked from when my grandson Ryan threw it against the wall last summer because I wouldn't buy him a new gaming console. I had only 9% battery left. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus. Marcus Donnelly lived next door to us for 23 years. We used to share everything from tools to gardening tips. I pressed call. It rang 4 times, long, electronic sounds in the oppressive quiet of the shelter room. "Hello, Artie." Marcus's voice was loud, cheerful, and saturated with holiday spirit. "Merry Christmas, buddy." I thought you guys were busy with family. Marcus, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, professional. I need you to do me a favor. Look out your window. Look directly at my house. There was a significant pause, followed by the muffled sound of footsteps moving across his hardwood floor. Okay, I'm looking, Artie. What am I looking for? Did you leave the garden lights on? No, Marcus. Are there any repair trucks outside? Any emergency vehicles? Fire trucks? Or the gas company? Repair trucks? No. Why would there be? Marcus chuckled. Then his voice suddenly became puzzled. Say, Artie, why is the house completely dark? I closed my eyes, my heart a heavy, cold weight in my chest. The leak was real. They had lied, but the furnace really did break. Dark, Artie? The place is lit up like the national Christmas tree. I can see the lights flashing from a street. And there are cars. Not just Victor's SUV. There's a big, white luxury sedan and a black sports coupe in the driveway. Looks like you guys are having a hell of a party. I can hear the music faintly from here. My chest tightened instantly. A sharp, agonizing pain, like a fist squeezing my heart, made me gasp a quiet, involuntary sound. I closed my eyes again, fighting the dizziness. A luxury sedan and a sports coupe. Those were the cars Serena's parents drove. Her father, the retired financier who looked at me like I was a piece of mold on his shoe. Her mother, who always asked if I'd scrub my hands before touching the serving spoons. Artie, you okay? Marcus asked, sensing the silence. Yeah, Marcus. I'm okay. Just checking on the timer for the exterior lights. They're faulty. Merry Christmas. I hung up before he could ask any more questions. The phone slipped from my suddenly numb hand onto the rough, gray blanket. There was no gas leak. There was no broken boiler. They were warm. They were safe. They were drinking expensive champagne and eating the prime rib I had paid for. Sitting in the living room I had floored with oak planks I cut myself. They had kicked me out, discarded me, to make room for Serena's real family. I wasn't just displaced. I was replaced. I lay back on the cot. The pain in my chest was a dull, throbbing weight now, a reminder of the blood pressure medication I realized I had left in the medicine cabinet. Or maybe Serena had packed it. I didn't have the energy to check the massive suitcase. I stared up at the dingy ceiling, at a large water stain shaped vaguely like a map of a country that didn't exist. I felt a single, hot tear slide down my temple and vanish into my ear. It was hot and it was angry. They thought I was garbage. They thought I was a burden to be disposed of in the dark, dirty streets. Victor, my own boy, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one I sat up with when he had childhood fevers, had chosen a woman who hated me over the father who loved him. I closed my eyes, but sleep was utterly impossible. The shelter was a symphony of misery, rattling coughs, deep, guttural snoring, and soft, sporadic crying. Hours passed. Around midnight, the man next to me stopped rocking and finally fell into a fitful sleep. I sat up again. My coat was bunched up under my head, acting as a lumpy pillow. I felt something crinkle sharply in the inner lining pocket. I reached in. My fingers brushed against a piece of thermal paper. I pulled it out. It was a lottery ticket. I had completely forgotten about it. Earlier that afternoon, before the storm became truly terrible, Serena had sent me to the corner convenience store to get whole milk for Ryan's cereal. Ryan, who is 16 and perfectly capable of walking 2 blocks, was busy raging over a video game on his headset. So I went. I bought the milk, and with the $3 change, I bought a single quick pick ticket for the Christmas Eve Northern Lights jackpot. The main prize had rolled over for nearly 10 weeks. I smoothed the crumpled ticket out on my shaky knee. The numbers were printed in black ink. 06, 11, 29, 33, 51, and the bonus ball 08. I looked around the room. In the far corner, mounted high on the wall in a steel, wire cage, a small television was playing the late-night news, the volume mercifully low. The news ticker at the bottom of the screen was scrolling sports scores and local weather alerts. Then the screen changed. Live jackpot draw results. I squinted. My reading glasses were certainly in the suitcase, but I could see well enough. The balls dropped one by one. 6. I looked at my ticket. 6. Okay, $3 back. 11. I looked again. 11. That was a coincidence. 29. My heart skipped a beat. It was a physical sensation, a hard, painful flutter in my rib cage. 3 numbers. That was maybe a couple of $100. Enough for a cheap motel room. 33. I sat up straighter. The canvas cot creaked loudly in the quiet, dark room. I held the ticket closer to my face. 33. 4 numbers. That was serious money. That was maybe $50,000. $50,000 meant I absolutely didn't have to go back. It meant I could get a small apartment. I could leave them forever. 51. The air left my lungs. I physically couldn't breathe. I looked at the screen. I looked at the paper. I looked at the screen again. 51. 5 numbers. That was $1 million. My hands started to shake. Not a little tremble, but a violent, uncontrollable shaking that made the paper ticket rattle loudly in the silence. And the bonus ball is 8. 8. The world stopped. The coughing man, the heavy snoring, the pervasive smell of bleach, all of it vanished. I was sitting in a vacuum of absolute, ringing silence. I looked at the ticket. 6, 11, 29, 33, 51. Bonus ball 8. I had the ticket. I had the only winning ticket. The news anchor appeared on the screen, her voice filled with manufactured excitement. We have just received reports of a single, validated winning ticket sold in the Toronto area for tonight's stunning $12 million jackpot. $12 million. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and dance. I felt a strange, cold, icy calm wash completely over me. It was the same calm I used to feel when I was an engineer standing on a scaffold during a sudden, unexpected storm, meticulously assessing the structural integrity of a failing beam. I was assessing my life. $12 million. I looked at the huge suitcase that held my old, worn clothes. I thought about the freezing, humiliating walk to the car. I thought about Serena's sneering, triumphant face. I thought about Victor's cowardice. They had thrown me away like garbage because they wanted my house and my retirement fund. They wanted the scraps of a life I had spent 40 years building. If they had let me stay, if they had just given me a warm bed and a plate of food, this ticket would have been theirs. I would have given it to them. I would have paid off Victor's crippling debts. I would have sent Ryan to the university he wanted. I would have bought Serena the expensive car she always demanded, because that's what fathers, what patriarchs are conditioned to do. But they didn't let me stay. I carefully folded the ticket. I took off my left boot and then my left sock. I placed the small piece of paper against the sole of my foot, then pulled the sock back on, hiding the fortune. I put my boot back on and tied the laces tight. Double knots. I lay back down on the cot. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It didn't look like a random shape anymore. It looked like a map to a new future where I answered to no one. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay there plotting. I wasn't just going to claim the money. I was going to claim my dignity. I was going to show them exactly what they had carelessly thrown away. And I was going to do it in a way that would ensure they could never, ever hurt me again. Morning came slowly, a gray, miserable light filtering through the high, barred windows of the shelter. The room woke up around me. Men coughing, shuffling toward the communal bathroom. I got up, washed my face with freezing cold water in a stainless steel sink that had no mirror. I put on my old coat. I grabbed my massive suitcase. I didn't wait for Victor to pick me up at noon. I knew, absolutely, that he wouldn't come. I walked out of the shelter and onto the street. The storm had passed entirely. The city was now covered in a pristine, blinding white blanket of snow. It was Christmas Day. I walked exactly 3 blocks, dragging the heavy suitcase behind me, until I found a payphone bolted to the side of a convenience store. My cracked cell phone battery was entirely dead. I used a 25-cent coin I found in my pocket. I didn't call a taxi. I called Silas. Silas Henderson was an old golf and drinking buddy from my engineering days. He was also, conveniently, the most ruthless and feared divorce and estate litigation lawyer in Ontario. Serena hated him. She had forbidden me from seeing him, claiming he was a bad influence. The truth was, she was terrified of him because Silas could smell deceit from a kilometer away. The phone rang for a long, irritating time. It was Christmas morning, after all. Finally, a gruff, heavily sleep-deprived voice answered. Yeah, who is this? Silas? It's Artie. Arthur Wallace. Artie, Merry Christmas. Why in the hell are you calling me at 7 in the morning from? He paused, likely checking the caller ID display. From a payphone on 7th Street? Did you finally get arrested for jaywalking? No, Silas. Listen to me, and listen carefully. I need you to meet me at your downtown office in exactly 1 hour. Artie, are you out of your mind? It's Christmas. I'm in my flannel pajamas, making waffles for the grandkids. Silas, I say, my voice low, hard, and absolutely unwavering. I'm holding a small piece of thermal paper worth $12 million. I need to legally cash it, and then I need to evict 3 people from my house before dinner time. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy, expensive silence. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping back violently and a frantic jingling of keys. I'll put on a pot of coffee, Artie, Silas said, his voice instantly sharp and energized. Don't talk to anyone else. Get here now, and take a cab. I hung up the phone. A yellow taxi drove past, and I flagged it down immediately. I got in and gave the address of Silas's prestigious law firm office. As we drove toward downtown, we passed my neighborhood. I saw the street leading to my house. I imagined them waking up, perhaps hung over from their lavish party, eating the expensive breakfast I paid for, opening presents under the magnificent tree I decorated. They probably thought I was still sleeping on that miserable cot, cold and utterly defeated. They had absolutely no idea that the storm was coming back. And this time, it wasn't bringing snow. It was bringing a meticulous, professional judgment day they would never forget. When I arrived at Silas Henderson's office, he was waiting at the polished glass doors of the high-rise. He was wearing a dark, rumpled tracksuit and a long trench coat, looking disheveled but alert, like a hawk startled from sleep. He ushered me in past the building security and up the elevator to the 45th floor. We sat in his corner office, overlooking the vast, frozen lake. I took off my boot. I peeled off my sock. I placed the small, unassuming ticket directly onto his mahogany desk. Silas put on his half-moon reading glasses. He looked at the ticket. He pulled up the winning numbers on his computer screen. He looked back at the ticket. He let out a low, drawn-out whistle that sounded like air escaping a tire. Well, Artie, he said, leaning back in his leather chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. You definitely weren't lying. That is a very, very pretty piece of paper. Now, tell me precisely why you want to evict your only son on Christmas Day. I told him. I told him every detail. The cold drive, the carbon monoxide lie, the shelter, the party, and the heavy suitcase. Silas listened without interrupting, his expression growing harder and colder with every sentence. He was a lawyer. He had witnessed the very worst of human nature, but even he looked genuinely disgusted by the end of my story. So, he said, turning back to me, the professional switch flipping on, here is the tactical situation. You are now wealthy, insanely wealthy, but right now, legally, you are a vulnerable senior citizen who was clearly abandoned by his caregivers. That gives us leverage, Artie, a substantial amount of leverage. What do we do first? I asked, finally feeling a flicker of hope. First, Silas said, picking up his secured desk phone, we verify this ticket with the Provincial Lottery Commission. I know the director. I'll get him to open the office for a verified claim today. We want this claim public. We want this news to be loud. Why public? I asked, confused. Usually, winners want to stay completely anonymous. Not you, Silas smiled, that shark-like professional grin showing all his teeth. You want them to see it. You want them to know exactly what they lost. If we keep it quiet, they might try to manipulate you, claim you're senile, try to get a medical power of attorney before the money hits your account. But if you're on the 6 o'clock news, holding a giant check, that protects you. It proves you are competent, and it drives the knife in 20 times deeper. I nodded slowly, decisively. Do it. And the eviction, Silas continued, cracking his knuckles. Technically, the house deed is still only in your name, right? You never signed it over. Yes, I confirmed. I never signed it over, even though Serena kept asking, saying it was for tax purposes. Good man. That means they are merely tenants at will, or more accurately, guests who have severely overstayed their welcome. We can't just legally kick them out onto the street without a process. Unless. Unless what? Unless we catch them committing a crime, or unless we make them leave voluntarily because they think they're getting something better. I looked at Silas. I don't want to give them anything better. You won't, Silas assured me. We're going to play a game, Artie. A game I call the Prodigal Father Returns. With a full portfolio. We're going to let them see the money. We're going to let them smell it. We're going to let them think they won the lottery too. And just when they reach out their greedy hands to grab it, we're going to snap the trap shut. I liked the sound of that plan immensely. By noon, we were at the glittering lottery headquarters. The director, a distinguished woman named Ms. Vance, met us, looking highly irritated to be pulled away from her holiday. She verified the ticket. She shook my hand vigorously. We can have the full press conference set up for the morning news tomorrow, Mr. Wallace, Ms. Vance said. Or we could do a breaking news spot tonight. Tonight, I said. Prime time. 6 o'clock sharp. Done. Silas immediately arranged for me to stay in the immense presidential suite of the Fairmont Royal York Hotel. He sent a personal shopper to get me a full new wardrobe, a perfectly tailored suit, new shirts, a beautiful leather belt. No more threadbare coats. I showered, I shaved, and I stared at the stranger in the mirror. He looked like Arthur Wallace, but his eyes were different. They were colder, and they were focused. At 6 o'clock, I sat in the hotel suite. Silas was next to me, nursing an expensive mineral water. We turned on the television. The local news intro played. Then the anchor's face appeared. Breaking news this Christmas evening. In a miraculous, heartwarming turn of events, the sole winner of last night's massive $12 million Northern Lights jackpot has come forward. But the story behind the win is absolutely heartbreaking. The screen changed to a pre-recorded video clip of me standing in the lottery office, holding the giant novelty check. I looked straight into the camera lens, straight into the living room of my family. I want to thank God, I said in the video, my voice calm and measured, and I want to thank my family. If they hadn't dropped me off at the shelter last night because there was no room for me in my own home, I might never have checked this ticket. This is a new beginning for me. A beginning where I choose exactly who belongs in my life. The segment ended. I looked at Silas. Now we wait, he said, checking his own phone. Let them sweat. Let them marinate in it. My phone, which was charging on the table, instantly lit up. It was Victor, then Serena, then Ryan, then Victor again. It buzzed and vibrated like an angry hornet trapped under glass. Don't answer, Silas ordered. We ordered an enormous meal of steak and lobster from room service. I ate slowly, savoring every single bite. I imagined the scene at my house, the screaming, the panic, the dawning, horrific realization that they had just thrown away $12 million. Around 8 o'clock, Silas's phone rang. It was the security desk downstairs. Mr. Henderson, the guard said, sounding deeply concerned. We have a very loud group down here. A Mr. Victor Wallace and his wife. They are shouting. They say they are here to pick up their elderly father. They claim he is confused and they need to take him home. Silas looked at me, his eyes alight with anticipation. Showtime, Artie. The massive crystal chandelier in the center of the hotel lobby was the size of a small car, casting 1,000 prisms of light across the polished marble floor. I stood directly beneath it, immaculate in my new suit. Silas, a silent shadow, stood at my shoulder as the revolving door spun and spat out my family. They didn't look like they belonged here. The hotel smelled of fresh lilies and expensive French perfume. They smelled of frantic desperation and exhaust fumes. Victor spotted me first. He froze, his eyes widening as he took in the suit, the straight posture, the sheer difference in the man he had contemptuously dumped on a curb less than 24 hours ago. For a split second, I saw it, the guilt. It flickered across his face like a faint shadow. But then, inevitably, the blinding, raw greed washed it away. Dad! Victor shouted when he saw me. He tried to sprint past the hotel security guard, but the guard put a heavy, restraining hand on his chest. Dad, thank God we finally found you. We saw the news clip. It's all a terrible misunderstanding. The heat is back on. We need to take you home now. I stepped out from beneath the chandelier. I was wearing a perfectly tailored, dark charcoal suit. I stood tall, my shoulders back. A misunderstanding, Victor? I asked calmly, my voice projecting clearly across the vast lobby. Yes, Serena yelled, pushing past her husband. Her face was smeared, her makeup running, suggesting hours of performative weeping. The boiler. The technician came back this morning. He fixed it instantly. It's safe now. We were so worried when we went to the shelter, and you were just gone. I looked at them. I looked at the fear and the sickening, naked avarice gleaming in their eyes. The boiler is fixed, I repeated. That's amazing, Victor. It's amazing how fast you fixed a boiler that wasn't broken. And it's even more amazing how you knew which shelter to go to, considering I never told anyone where you dropped me off. Victor froze. But you know what I said? I continued, glancing subtly at the expensive watch Silas had loaned me. I am tired. I have been sleeping on a cot. I have been dealing with lawyers and bankers all day. I just want to sit in my own chair. Dad, please, Victor begged, the desperate whine returning to his voice. I looked at Silas. Silas gave me a barely perceptible nod. The trap was set. Fine, I said, letting a long, weary sigh escape my lips. The sound of an old man who just wants peace. I'll come home, but things are going to be very different, Victor. Very different. Of course, Dad. Anything you want. Serena immediately chimed in, her eyes practically glowing with imagined dollar signs. I walked past them toward the revolving doors where the hotel's black limousine was already waiting. I didn't let them ride with me. I let them follow in their dusty, beat-up SUV. As I sat in the plush leather seat of the limo, watching the city lights pass by, I knew the real game was just beginning. I was going back into the snake pit. But this time, I was the one carrying the venom, and I wasn't going to strike until they had fully exposed their necks. The coffee in Silas Henderson's office had tasted like battery acid and salvation. It was Christmas morning. The city outside was hushed under a fresh blanket of snow, and I was sitting across from the only man in Toronto who hated my daughter-in-law as much as I did. Silas had been wearing a flannel robe over a dress shirt, looking every bit the ruthless legal animal he was famous for being. But his eyes were sharp, locked onto the small slip of thermal paper sitting on his mahogany desk. He picked it up with a pair of surgical tweezers he had pulled from a desk drawer, treating it like a piece of radioactive material. He scanned it against the numbers on his computer screen back and forth 3 times. Then he took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and let out a low, long whistle that sounded like a deflating tire. Arthur, he said, his voice gravelly, you have just become the most dangerous man in Ontario. I took a sip of the terrible coffee. I didn't feel dangerous. I felt exhausted. My bones still ached from the cot at the shelter. I don't want to be dangerous, Silas, I told him. I just want my life back. I want them out of my house. Silas shook his head, the shark-like grin spreading across his face again. No, Artie, you're thinking too small. Evicting them is simple. We can have the sheriff there by noon. But you told me they dumped you in a shelter. You told me they lied about a gas leak to throw a party. That is not a simple tenancy dispute. That is a crime. That is war. And in war, you do not just repel the enemy. You crush them so they can never, ever return. He swiveled his chair and started typing furiously on his keyboard. First things first, we need to secure the asset. I am drafting a blind trust. We claim the $12 million in the name of the trust. Your name stays off the initial official press release, but you said you wanted them to see it. I want them to see it, I confirmed. I want them to choke on their champagne. Good, Silas said. We go public, but before we do that, we need to secure the battlefield. He looked at me over his monitor. The house, the deed. Is it still only in your name? Yes, I said. I built it. I paid for it. Did you ever sign a quitclaim deed? Did you ever add Victor or Serena to the title? Did you ever sign a financial power of attorney giving them control over your real estate assets? I shook my head. Serena had tried. She had brought papers home a dozen times, saying it was for estate planning, saying it would save on taxes. I always told her I would think about it. I never signed. Silas pulled up the county recorder website. He clicked a few keys, hummed to himself, and then nodded. You are clear. Arthur Wallace, sole owner. That means they are trespassing. But, and this is the important part, they don't know that you know they're trespassing. They think you are a confused old man who genuinely believes there's a gas leak. He reached for his secure desk phone and dialed a number from memory. It was 7:30 in the morning on Christmas, but someone answered on the first ring. Miller, it's Henderson. I have a high-priority job. Triple rate because it's Christmas. No, not a divorce. Surveillance. I need you to go to the Wallace residence in Oakville. I need audio and video inside the common areas. Yes, today. I don't care how you do it. Use the usual trick. He hung up and looked at me. Miller is the best private investigator in the city. He is an ex-cop who got fired for being too good at bending the rules. He is going to get ears inside your house within the hour. Ow! I asked. They won't let a stranger in. Silas smirked. They won't let a stranger in, but they will let a utility worker in or a delivery driver. Or better yet, they will let a concerned neighbor in who found something belonging to poor old Arthur. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Here is the critical strategy, Artie. Listen close. We're not going to kick them out today. We're going to let them stay. We're going to let them think they won. We need to record them. We need to hear them admitting to what they did. We need to hear them conspiring to get your money. In this jurisdiction, if we can prove elder abuse or conspiracy to commit fraud, we don't just evict them. We prosecute them. We make sure they leave in handcuffs, not in an Uber. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. Jail. My own son. I looked at the snow falling outside the window. I thought about him driving away last night. I thought about the heavy suitcase. He knew. He knew he wasn't coming back for me. Do it, I said, my voice firm. Silas nodded. Now, we need a pretext for Miller to get the bugs in. You left your medication there, right? My blood pressure pills, I said. They're in the medicine cabinet in the master bathroom, which they took over 4 years ago. Perfect, Silas said. Miller is going to go to the door. He is going to say he is a courier sent by you to retrieve your life-saving medication because you are stuck at a friend's house due to the storm. While he is waiting for them to fetch the pills, he's going to plant 3 listening devices. One in the kitchen, one in the main living room, and one in the hallway. They're smaller than a dime. They have a 72-hour battery life. That is all we need. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk toward me. This is a retainer agreement. It gives me full authority to act as your legal representative. It also authorizes the formation of the trust and the hiring of the private investigator. Sign it, and you stop being a victim. Sign it, and you become the CEO of your own retribution. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. It felt solid and substantial in my hand. I looked at the signature line. For years, I had signed checks for Victor's failed businesses. I had signed for his car loans. I had signed for his bail that one time in college. I had signed my life away piece by piece, trying to buy his love. This was the first time I was signing for myself. I wrote my name in clear, bold letters. Arthur Wallace. I put the pen down. Silas snatched the papers up and filed them instantly into a secured folder. Done. Now get changed. I have a suit in the closet that should fit you. We have a press conference to schedule. But before that, we need to make one critical phone call to the bank. The bank? I asked. Silas's eyes glittered. We need to freeze your current assets. Not the lottery money your checking account, your savings, the small retirement they have been slowly draining. We're going to lock it all down. When they try to buy their elaborate Christmas dinner or fill up their gas tank today, I want the card to decline. I want them to feel the first pinch of the winter cold. I want them to start panicking because when people panic, already they make mistakes. And we're going to be listening to every single one of them. He picked up the phone again. The game had begun. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't the one who was going to lose. The limousine tires crunched over the fresh snow in my driveway, a sound that felt distinctly different from the scraping of my old boots on the ice 24 hours earlier. When the driver opened the door, I didn't step out into the cold wind of abandonment. I stepped out into a receiving line. Victor was already there, his hand extended to help me up, treating me as if I were made of fragile, antique porcelain instead of the same flesh and bone he had discarded the night before. Careful, Dad, he said, his voice thick with a sudden, cloying solicitousness that made my skin crawl. The steps are slippery. We wouldn't want you to fall. I looked at him. This was the man who had watched me drag a heavy suitcase across a frozen parking lot without lifting a finger. Now he was guiding me by the elbow, shielding me from a non-existent breeze. I let him do it. I let him lead me up the walkway, past the snow-covered rose bushes I had planted for his mother, and toward the front door where Serena was waiting. She had fixed her makeup. The mascara streaks were gone, replaced by a fresh, perfect coat of ruby lipstick and a smile that looked like it had been surgically stapled onto her face. She held the door open wide, ushering me into the warmth. "Welcome home, Arthur," she said, practically curtsying. "We kept the beautiful limestone fireplace going for you. Here, let me take your coat. That is a gorgeous suit. Is it Italian wool?" "It is," I said, allowing her to peel the jacket from my shoulders. She stroked the fabric with a hungry, possessive touch that wasn't about fashion. It was about value. She was assessing the net worth of the man standing in her foyer. The house smelled intensely of roasted duck and expensive red wine, a scent that should have been comforting, but now smelled only like bait. They led me to the dining room. The large table was set with the good china, the wedding china my wife and I had received 42 years ago, which Serena usually kept locked away in a cabinet because she claimed I was too clumsy to use it. Now, my place setting was at the head of the table, flanked by shimmering crystal goblets and polished silver. "Sit, Dad. Sit," Victor urged, pulling out the chair with an aggressive eagerness. I sat. I looked around the table. Serena's parents, George and Linda, were already seated, smiling at me with a terrifying, forced intensity. "Artie," George boomed, raising his wine glass, his sneer carefully hidden. "The man of the hour. We were just saying how absolutely incredible this is. A miracle. Truly, a miracle." I agreed, slowly unfolding my linen napkin. "Or luck. Or perhaps justice." They laughed nervously, brittle sounds that didn't reach their eyes. "Justice." George chuckled. "Yes, justice. You deserve it, Artie. You worked hard your whole life." I looked at him. "You told me last Thanksgiving that I was a leech on society because I retired early," I said calmly. George choked on his wine. He coughed, turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "Oh, Artie, that was just light political banter. You know how I am, just talking big. I never meant you specifically." I didn't smile. I just picked up my fork. Just then, the kitchen door swung open and my grandson Ryan walked in. He was 16 years old, wearing headphones around his neck and the usual sullen expression that greeted me whenever I entered a room. But tonight, the headphones were off. He was wearing a slightly wrinkled collared shirt. It was an effort. He stopped at the table and looked at me. His eyes went to the suit, then to the heavy watch, then finally to my face. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, sounding unusually hesitant. "Hello, Ryan," I replied. He shuffled his feet. I saw you on TV. That was absolutely insane." "It was," I said. "Is it true?" he asked, sliding into the chair next to me. "Do you really have $12 million? Victor cleared his throat sharply. "Ryan, don't be rude. It is okay," I said, waving a hand in dismissal. "Yes, Ryan, it is true." Ryan's face instantly transformed. The sullen teenager vanished, replaced by a bright-eyed, eager opportunist. "That is awesome, Grandpa. Seriously. You know, I was telling Dad, my car, the Olsen, it's making a really weird noise. The transmission is shot." "Ryan," Serena hissed, warning him with a fierce look. "Not now. No, it's fine," I said, leaning back in my chair, swirling the wine I shouldn't be drinking due to my forgotten blood pressure medication. "Tell me about the car, Ryan." "Well," Ryan said, leaning in, sensing a massive opening. "It's just old, you know? And I was thinking, since you have all this money now, maybe I could drive you around. I could be like your personal concierge driver. But I would need something safer, something reliable." "Reliable?" I repeated. "Yeah, like I saw this Jaguar F-Pace online. It's got great safety ratings, and it would be perfect for getting you to your appointments and stuff." "A Jaguar," I mused. "That is an expensive car, Ryan." "It is an investment," Ryan said quickly. "For the family. For your safety." I looked at Victor and Serena. They were trying to look disapproving, but their eyes were gleaming, reflecting the golden light of the chandelier. They wanted the car as much as he did. They saw it as the first, small drop of rain in the coming monsoon of cash. I took a slow bite of the roast duck. It was dry and rubbery. You know, Ryan, I said, chewing thoughtfully. A man in my position should ensure his family travels in style. If I'm going to be a philanthropist, I can't have my grandson driving a broken sedan. Ryan's jaw dropped. Really? You mean it? I nodded. We will talk about it tomorrow. Maybe we can go to the dealership, pick out something suitable. Ryan practically vibrated in his seat. Thanks, Grandpa. You're the absolute best. He picked up his fork and started eating with gusto, casting admiring glances at me between bites. It was disgusting. It was intoxicating. I was buying their affection with money I hadn't even deposited yet, and they were selling it so cheaply. The dinner continued. Serena piled more potatoes onto my plate. Victor kept refilling my wine glass, asking me about the lottery office, asking me about the trust, asking me about the taxes. He was fishing, desperate to know where the money was located. So, Dad, Victor said casually, trying to sound like a responsible son, we need to make absolutely sure this is handled correctly. Henderson, he is a divorce lawyer, right? Is he really the best person to handle a sum this large? I have a friend, a wealth manager at George's old firm. He could set up a diversified portfolio for you. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. Silas is handling the legal side, I said. But you're right, Victor. I need someone I trust completely to handle the accounts. Someone family. Serena stopped chewing. She looked at Victor. Victor looked at me, his heart clearly pounding against his ribs. I am so overwhelmed, I continued, putting a subtle tremor into my voice. The forms, the taxes. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I get confused with all the zeros. We can help, Serena said, her voice soft, dangerously predatory. We can handle the day-to-day. Arthur, you shouldn't have to worry about bills anymore. We can set up a joint account just for access so we can pay your expenses. That sounds helpful, I said. I suppose I should put the preliminary trust documents I got from Silas in the safe for tonight. The safe, Victor exclaimed, standing up instantly. Yes, great idea. The wall safe in the study. It's the most secure place in the house. Let's do it now. Yes, before dessert, Serena added, standing up immediately, just so we can relax knowing it is secure. I nodded slowly and stood up. My legs felt heavy, feigning the exhaustion of an old man. I walked toward the study, the entire family trailing behind me like a parade of vultures. The study was the one room in the house they hadn't completely colonized. My old drafting table was still in the corner, covered in dust. The wall safe was concealed behind a large, framed photograph of the schooner my father used to sail. Victor moved the photograph. The digital keypad of the safe glowed ominously in the dim light. Go ahead, Dad, Victor said, stepping back to give me room. I stood in front of the safe. I stared at the numbers. I knew the code. It was my wedding anniversary, 0525198. I had opened this safe 1,000 times. I raised my hand. My finger hovered over the 5. Then I stopped. I lowered my hand slowly. What's wrong, Arthur? Serena asked from the doorway, her voice tight with anticipation. I rubbed my forehead. I turned to look at them, putting a look of utter, convincing bewilderment on my face. I can't remember. I can't remember the code. You can't remember the code? Victor asked, a nervous, high-pitched laugh escaping his lips. Dad, you open this safe every month to get your passport. I know, I said, my voice rising in a fake panic. I know, but it's gone. My mind is just blank. It has been such a long 48 hours. The shelter, the cold, the shock. It's okay, Serena said, stepping forward, her voice tight with forced calm. It's okay, Arthur. Just take a deep breath. Is it your birthday? 0813. I tried it. The safe beeped error. Is it Victor's birthday? She suggested frantically. I tried it. Error. Is it 1234? Ryan offered from the back, genuinely worried. I tried it. Error. System locked. Wait 15 minutes. The red light on the safe blinked mockingly. I slumped against the desk, feigning defeat. I'm sorry, I whispered. I am so useless. My memory, it is getting worse, the doctor said. I let the sentence hang in the air. I watched them. I saw the look that passed between Serena and Victor. It wasn't concern. It was pure, icy calculation. He is losing it, Victor's eyes said. He is senile, Serena's eyes replied. Perfect, their shared gaze concluded. Don't worry, Dad, Victor said, putting a comforting yet possessive hand on my shoulder. It happens. Stress does crazy things to the mind. We can try again in the morning. Or, he paused, looking at Serena. Or maybe we can call a professional locksmith tomorrow if you really can't remember. We need to make sure those documents are safe. Yes, I said, sounding utterly defeated. A locksmith. That is a good idea. I'm so confused lately. Serena walked over and gently took my arm. Come on, Arthur. You are exhausted. Let's get you to bed. You need rest. We will take care of everything. She led me out of the study. As we walked away, I glanced back. Victor was still staring at the safe, his greed practically burning a hole through the steel door. He thought I was a broken, senile old man who had just handed him the keys to the kingdom. He thought his plan to declare me legally incompetent was going to be easier than he ever imagined. He had no idea that the safe was empty. I had moved the house deed and my passport to a safety deposit box 3 months ago, and the trust documents in my pocket were just brochures for luxury yachts I had picked up in the hotel lobby. I let Serena lead me up the stairs to my old bedroom. She turned down the covers. She fluffed the pillow. Sleep well, Arthur, she said, her voice dripping with counterfeit warmth. We are so glad you are home. I laid my head on the pillow. I listened to her footsteps retreating down the hall. Then I listened to the muffled, excited whispers coming from downstairs as they plotted how to spend my money. I smiled faintly in the dark. Let them dream tonight. Because tomorrow, the nightmare begins. The morning sun that filtered through the bay windows of the breakfast nook was deceptively cheerful, casting bright squares of light onto the table where my execution was being prepared. The smell of bacon grease and freshly brewed coffee hung heavy in the air, a domestic camouflage for the ambush that was waiting for me next to the toast rack. I sat there nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the steam rise and twist, trying to calm the racing of my heart. I had to look tired. I had to look defeated. I had to look like a man whose mind was slipping through his fingers like dry sand. Serena was moving around the kitchen with a tense, manic energy, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. She wasn't cooking, she was arranging. She placed a stack of documents on the table with a heavy thud right next to my plate of scrambled eggs. It wasn't a napkin. It wasn't the morning paper. It was a thick sheath of legal paper stapled at the corner, thick with fine print and bad intentions. Here we go, Arthur, she said, her voice coated in that synthetic sweetness she reserved for when she wanted something expensive. Eat up. You need your strength. We have a big day ahead of us. I looked at the papers. I didn't touch them. I looked at Victor, who was sitting across from me, aggressively buttering a piece of toast. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was focused on the bread, tearing it apart with unnecessary force. What is this? I asked, keeping my voice thin and carefully quavering. Is it about the lottery taxes? Serena pulled out a chair and sat next to me too close. Her perfume was overpowering, a floral assault meant to distract. No, Arthur, it is not taxes. We handle the taxes in our heads already. This is about protection. Protection, I repeated, letting my hand shake as I reached for my water glass. Yes, Dad, Victor said, finally looking up. His eyes were bloodshot. He clearly hadn't slept, probably staying up all night counting my money. After last night with the safe, we are really worried about you. You couldn't remember your own wedding anniversary. That is not normal. That is a sign of decline. Decline. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. I rubbed my forehead, feigning a debilitating headache. It was just the stress, Victor. The shelter, the cold. I'm sure it will come back to me. But what if it doesn't? Serena interjected, leaning in, placing her hand firmly over mine. Her skin was cold and damp. What if you forget to pay the heating bill? What if you forget where you put the winning check? What if that lawyer Henderson tries to take advantage of you? He's a shark, Arthur. Everyone knows it. He sees a confused elderly man with $12 million, and he sees a payday. We can't let him steal your legacy. I looked down at the table. The irony was so thick, I could cut it with a knife. They were warning me about a thief while trying to pick my pocket in broad daylight. So, what is this paper? I asked again. It is a general power of attorney, Serena said, smoothing the cover page. It just allows Victor and me to help you. It gives us the ability to talk to the bank for you, to pay your bills, to manage the investments. It doesn't mean you lose your money, Arthur. It just means we can carry the burden for you. You earn this rest. You shouldn't have to worry about wire transfers and account numbers at your age. I stared at the document. I knew exactly what it was. Silas had briefed me on it. A general power of attorney in the wrong hands was a license to steal everything. It would give them the legal right to empty my accounts, sell my property, and sign my name to anything they wanted. It was the key to the kingdom. I don't know, I muttered, pushing my eggs away. I should probably read it or show it to Silas. No, Victor snapped too loud. He flinched, then quickly lowered his voice. No, Dad, you don't need Henderson for this. This is a family matter. Lawyers just complicate things. They charge you $500 an hour just to read a standard form. This is just us, your family. Don't you trust us? He looked at me with those wide, earnest puppy dog eyes that used to work when he was 12 and had broken a window. But he wasn't 12 anymore. He was a 39-year-old man who was trying to swindle his father. I trust you, I lied. My voice cracked perfectly. My eyes. I left my reading glasses upstairs. The print is so small. I'll read it to you, Serena offered quickly. She flipped the page. It basically says that we, Victor and Serena Wallace, are your agents. It says we act in your best interest. See? Standard language. Fiduciary duty. That means we have to be good. It is the law. She expertly skipped over the paragraphs about unlimited gifting powers and the right to sell real estate immediately. I saw them. I recognized the clauses. But I nodded along, blinking rapidly as if I were struggling to focus. I guess if it helps, I said weakly. It helps immensely, Dad, Victor said. It means we can set up that investment account today. We can get you that car Ryan wants. We can secure the future. Just sign it and we can stop worrying. Serena produced a pen from her silk pajama pocket. It wasn't just any pen. It was a heavy black Mont Blanc. It looked like a weapon. She uncapped it and pressed it into my hand. Right here, Arthur. She pointed to the line at the bottom of the page. And here, and on the last page. We need 3 copies. I held the pen. I let the tip hover over the paper. My hand was genuinely trembling, a physical reaction to the cold, focused rage boiling inside me. They were watching the pen tip like cats watching a laser pointer. Their greed was palpable, a physical heat radiating from their bodies. I can't keep my hand steady, I complained, dropping the pen. It clattered onto the table. Serena picked it up instantly and shoved it back into my fingers. It is okay, she soothed, her voice tight with barely contained impatience. Just your best. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a mark. I took a deep breath. I thought about Silas's instructions. We had rehearsed this. We had practiced the specific way I needed to sign. It had to be legible enough to be accepted by them, but critically flawed enough to be flagged by the bank's fraud department when Silas called it in. Your signature card at the bank, Artie, requires your full middle name. Arthur Daniel Wallace. You have signed every check that way for 40 years. If you sign this document as just Arthur Wallace or Arthur D. Wallace, we can contest it. We can claim duress. We can claim it doesn't match your official exemplar. It gives us the trapdoor. I gripped the pen. I hunched over the table, acting like the effort was costing me everything. Okay, I wheezed. For the family. I put the pen to the paper. I wrote slowly, painfully. ARTHURWALLACE. I lifted the pen. I looked at it. No middle name. No Daniel. Just the bare minimum. Is that okay? I asked, looking up at them with watery eyes. I forgot my middle name. I'm so tired. Victor snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. It is perfect, Dad. It is beautiful. Serena flipped to the next page. Arthur, just like that. Don't worry about the middle name. We know who you are. I signed the second copy, Arthur Wallace. I signed a third copy, Arthur Wallace. With every stroke of the pen, I saw their shoulders relax. I saw the tension leave their bodies. They thought they had won. They thought they had just legally hijacked $12 million. They didn't know they were holding 3 pieces of evidence that would prove conspiracy to commit fraud. By rushing me, by accepting a signature that was visibly shaky and incomplete, by bypassing my lawyer, they were digging their own graves. Serena gathered the papers together, tapping them sharply on the table to align the edges. She looked at that stack of paper with more love than she had ever looked at my son. I will file these in the study safe, she said, standing up. Safe and sound. And then she did something that almost made me break character. She patted me on the head like I was a loyal but aging dog, like I was a child who had just finished his vegetables. Good job, Arthur, she said. Now, why don't you go rest in the living room? Victor and I have some very important calls to make to the bank. I watched her walk away. Victor lingered for a moment. He looked at the empty plate where my toast used to be. Thanks, Dad, he mumbled. You won't regret this. I looked at him. I looked at the son who had just tricked his father into signing away his life. I know I won't, Victor, I said softly. He didn't hear the double meaning. He just nodded and followed his wife into the hallway. I heard them high-five. I actually heard the sharp, dry slap of skin on skin. Then I heard Serena whisper, "We did it. We are rich." I sat at the table for a long time. The coffee was now stone cold. The house was quiet, but inside my head the clock was ticking. They were going to the bank. They were going to try to use that paper. And when they did, Silas's trap would snap shut. I stood up, my legs feeling stronger than they had all morning. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. Go ahead, I whispered to the empty room. Go to the bank. Run, because you're running straight off a cliff. And this time, I am not going to catch you. The polished marble floors of the First Commonwealth Bank of Canada had echoed with the footsteps of the nation's wealthiest for a century. But today, they were about to witness the financial and legal suicide of a fool. I walked through the revolving glass doors, my cane tapping a steady, deliberate rhythm against the stone, while my son Victor gripped my elbow with a force that was less about support and entirely about containment. He was guiding a prisoner, not a father. His palm was sweating against my suit jacket, and I could practically hear the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He was vibrating with a manic energy, a frantic need to see the numbers on a screen that would immediately solve all the problems his greed had created. We approached the manager's desk. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on the 26th of December. The bank was quiet, filled with the hushed rustle of money being counted and the low, constant hum of the air conditioning system. Victor didn't wait for the velvet rope. He steered me forcefully toward the desk of the senior relationship manager, a woman named Ms. Gable. I knew Ms. Gable. I had known her for 15 years. She was the one who had helped me set up my retirement accounts. She was the one who knew about the small withdrawals I made to buy Victor's first car. And crucially, she was the one Silas Henderson had called at 7:30 this morning while I was eating my cold breakfast. She looked up as we approached, her face composed into a perfect mask of professional neutrality. But I saw the knowing flicker in her eyes when they met mine. She knew the stage was set. "Mr. Wallace," she said, her voice smooth and cool. "It is good to see you. And this must be your son, Victor." Victor didn't shake her hand. He slapped the power of attorney folder onto her desk, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the quiet bank. "We need to do a transfer," he said, his voice too loud, too fast. "A large one, internal. From my father's primary savings to a joint management account we opened online this morning." Ms. Gable didn't blink. She slowly opened the folder. She looked at the power of attorney document, the one I had signed with a trembling hand and a deliberately missing middle name just an hour before. She studied it for a long time, too long for Victor's liking. "Is there a problem?" Victor snapped, drumming his fingers incessantly on the mahogany. "It is notarized. It is legal." Ms. Gable looked up over her reading glasses. "It appears to be in order, Mr. Wallace. However, for a transfer of this magnitude, and this is a very significant magnitude, we require verbal confirmation from the account holder, regardless of the documentation." It is bank policy for the protection of our senior clients. Victor turned to me, his eyes wide and threatening. Tell her, Dad. Tell her it is exactly what you want. I sat down heavily in the plush leather chair opposite the desk, letting out a long, weary sigh. I looked at Ms. Gable. I tried to make my eyes look cloudy, confused. Yes, I said, my voice rasping slightly. I want Victor to handle it. The numbers, they're simply too big for me now. I just want to rest. Please, just do what he says so we can go home. It was the performance of a lifetime. I sounded like a man who had finally given up. Ms. Gable nodded slowly. Very well, Arthur. How much are we transferring today? Victor leaned in, his breath smelling of stale coffee and mints. $6 million, he whispered, slightly increasing the amount from his initial plan, as if saying the number out loud might make it disappear. $6 million, leaving the rest for taxes and initial expenses. Ms. Gable typed on her keyboard. The click-clack of the keys was the only sound in the world. Victor was holding his breath. I watched his face. He was sweating beads of perspiration forming visibly on his upper lip. He was thinking about the loan shark. He was thinking about the house he had already promised to sell. He was thinking about the life he felt he was owed. Authorization required, Ms. Gable said, frowning slightly at her screen. Since this is a new payee account, the system has flagged it for a standard security hold. Victor's face went instantly pale. Hold? What kind of hold? We need the funds available today. Immediately. Ms. Gable typed again. Let me see if I can override the initial delay. She paused, tapping a key with rhythmic precision. Silas had scripted this perfectly. The bank wasn't actually moving a dime. They had flagged my account for suspicious activity the moment the power of attorney was scanned because the signature didn't match my signature card. The Daniel was missing. But Silas had asked them to make it look real, to give Victor the show he needed to hang himself. Okay, Ms. Gable said, her voice neutral. I have processed the override. The transfer of $6 million has been initiated. It will show as pending on your mobile application immediately. The funds are technically deducted from Arthur's account and are in transit to yours. However, full clearance for withdrawal usually takes 24 hours, but you will see the balance reflected now. She turned the monitor so we could see. There was a digital mirage. My account balance showed a deduction of $6 million. Victor whipped out his phone. He opened his banking app. His thumb hit the refresh button so hard I thought he would crack the screen. The little loading circle spun, and then there it was. Balance, $6 million pending. Victor made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He stared at the screen. He touched the numbers as if they were holy grail. He was rich. In his mind, he was rich. He didn't understand what pending meant in the world of high finance fraud investigations. He thought it meant done. He thought it meant he had won. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you. He grabbed my arm, pulling me up from the chair. Come on, Dad. We have to go. We have things to do. He didn't even say goodbye to Ms. Gable. He practically dragged me toward the exit. As we walked away, I glanced back. Ms. Gable gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The trap wasn't just set. The jaws had snapped shut. We walked out into the cold sunlight, and Victor stopped immediately on the sidewalk. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at the traffic. He was looking only at his phone. He dialed a number. Vinny, he said, his voice shaking now with a fresh, toxic arrogance. It is Victor. Yeah, I have it. I have it all. No, I am not joking. Check the wire in the morning. I am sending you the $50,000 plus the interest right now. Yeah, we are good. He hung up. He laughed a jagged, manic sound. Then he dialed again. Exotic motor cars. Yeah, this is Victor Wallace. I was in there last week looking at the Aston Martin DB11, the black one. Is it still there? Good. Market sold. I am transferring the deposit right now. $75,000. Yes, from the app. I will come pick it up on Friday. I stood there leaning on my cane, watching my son destroy his life in real time. He was spending money that didn't exist to buy things he didn't need, to impress people who didn't care. He was initiating transfers from an account that was currently frozen by the fraud department. Every click, every confirmation number was another count of wire fraud. Another nail in the coffin Silas was building. Dad, Victor shouted, turning to me, his eyes wild with euphoria. Did you hear that? The Aston Martin. I'm getting it. And we're going to Europe. Serena wants to go to Rome for New Year's first class. He dialed again. This time, it was a travel agent. He booked 4 tickets. First class. The total came to $35,000. He gave him the debit card number linked to the account that showed the pending $6 million. The agent on the phone must have run the card. It must have gone through based on the temporary authorization of the pending funds. The bank was giving him enough rope to hang himself from the highest tree in the county. Done, Victor said, hanging up. We are flying out on the 2nd. Rome. Dad, we are going to celebrate in Rome. He hugged me. It was a rough, aggressive hug. He wasn't hugging his father. He was hugging his ATM. He was hugging the source of his liberation. I patted his back awkwardly. That sounds expensive, Victor. It is nothing, he crowed, pulling away. We have 6 million and 6 million more coming. We can burn money if we want to. He led me to his SUV. He drove fast, too fast. He was high on dopamine and greed. He turned up the radio, blasting classic rock, drumming his hands on the steering wheel. He texted while driving, sending screenshots of his bank balance to Serena, to his friends, to his old fraternity brothers who had ignored him for years. Look at this, Dad, he yelled over the music. Look at the zeros. That is respect. That is power. I looked at the phone he shoved in my face. I saw the number. I saw the word pending in small gray letters next to it. It is very impressive, son, I said quietly. He didn't hear the sadness in my voice. He only heard the validation he craved. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet, but the energy coming off Victor was loud enough to wake the dead. He stormed into the house, screaming for Serena. Babe, babe, look. Serena came running from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. What? Did you do it? Victor held up the phone. Serena screamed. It was a high-piercing shriek of pure, uncut avarice. She grabbed the phone, staring at it, her eyes devouring the screen. 6 million, she whispered. Oh my God, Victor, we are free. We are more than free, Victor said, grabbing her waist and spinning her around. We are wealthy. I bought the car. I booked the trip. The Aston Martin. Serena kissed him hard and messy. Then she pulled back, her eyes shining with a terrifying light. And the house, she asked. Did you call Vinny? Victor nodded. Vinny knows. His crew is coming tomorrow. We need to have him out by 8 a.m. They both turned to look at me. I was standing in the doorway, leaning on my cane, still wearing my coat. They had forgotten I was there. For a moment, they looked at me with annoyance, as if I were a stain on their perfect new life. Right? Victor said, his face hardening. The house. He walked over to me, his posture changing again. He wasn't the excited boy anymore. He was the landlord. Dad, he said, his voice dropping an octave. This is great news, but it means things are moving fast, faster than we thought. We have a lot of packing to do. Packing? I asked, feigning confusion. Yeah. Serena stepped forward, crossing her arms. For the move. Remember we talked about the facility, the Maplewood Retirement Center? They have a bed open tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. I repeated, feigning shock. But I thought I was staying here with the family? Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. Dad, look. We're going to Rome. We can't take you to Rome. You would hate it. The walking, the crowds, the food, it's too much. And we can't leave you here alone. The house needs extensive work. We are doing renovations. It wouldn't be safe. Renovations? I asked. You are selling it. I heard you last night. Victor flinched, but Serena didn't miss a beat. We are selling it to buy a better house, Arthur. A massive estate with a separate guest wing just for you. But we need the cash flow now. The facility is just temporary. Just for a few weeks until we get back and find a new place. It is a nice place. Really, it is like a high-end nursing home. A high-end nursing home, I thought. No, Maplewood is a lockdown facility in a remote corner of the county for people with severe dementia. It smells like urine and despair. They medicate the residents until they don't know their own name. I don't want to go, I whispered, backing up until I hit the door frame. Please, Victor, let me stay. I can stay in the basement. I won't be in the way. Victor looked at Serena. Serena shook her head. A sharp, imperceptible movement. No mercy. It is done, Arthur, she said coldly. The van is booked. The papers are signed. You are going, and you're going to pack right now, because I want this house empty before I go to sleep." She walked over to the pantry and pulled out a box of heavy-duty black garbage bags. She tossed them at me. They hit my chest and slid to the floor with a soft plastic rustle. "Go upstairs," she ordered. "Pack your clothes. Not the suit. You won't need a suit where you're going. Just the basics. Sweatpants, underwear. The rest goes in the trash or to Goodwill. We're not paying for storage." I looked at Victor. He was looking at his phone again. "Victor," I said, "please, it's Christmas." He didn't look up. "It's December 26th, Dad. Christmas is over. Go pack." I stood there for a moment, the silence stretching out heavy and suffocating. Then I bent down. My knees cracked. I picked up the garbage bags. I felt the plastic crinkle in my hands. It was the sound of my life being discarded. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard Serena exhale. Finally, she muttered. I thought he would never shut up. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was racing. This was it. This was the definitive evidence Silas needed. They weren't just stealing. They were evicting a vulnerable senior citizen from his own home to facilitate a fraudulent sale. They were conspiring to commit abandonment and criminal conversion. Every word they had just said was recorded on the server in Silas's office. I entered my bedroom and turned on the light. It was a room I'd shared with my wife for 30 years. Her perfume bottles were still on the vanity, dusty now, but still there. The photos of us on our honeymoon, of Victor's graduation, of Ryan's birth, they were all on the dresser. I snapped open a garbage bag. I didn't pack clothes. I walked over to the dresser. I picked up the silver frame, holding the photo of Victor receiving his diploma. I looked at his smiling young face, so full of promise. I looked at the man he had become downstairs, counting money that wasn't his. I dropped the photo into the bag. The glass shattered. I went to the closet. I pulled out my old shirts, the ones Serena had complained smelled like old man. I stuffed them in. I moved mechanically, making enough noise for them to hear downstairs. I wanted them to know I was complying. I wanted them to feel safe. Serena came to the door 10 minutes later. She leaned against the frame, watching me. She was there to supervise, to make sure I didn't steal anything of value. "Leave the watch," she said, pointing to the Rolex Silas had loaned me. "And the cufflinks, those stay." I took off the watch and placed it on the nightstand. I took out the cufflinks. "Anything else?" I asked. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning for value. "The antique jewelry box on the dresser. Your wife's rings. Are they in there?" I froze. "No," I said. "They're in the safety deposit box." "Good," she said. "I will get the key from you in the morning. Those diamonds will fetch a good price. We can use the money to upgrade our hotel suite in Rome." She turned and walked away. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the plastic bag. They wanted to sell my wife's wedding ring. They wanted to pawn the symbol of the only pure love I had ever known to pay for a room upgrade. That was the final straw. Any lingering doubt, any tiny shred of paternal instinct that might have urged me to show mercy evaporated. They were hollow. They were pure rot, and they needed to be excised. I finished packing. I put the single bag by the door. I sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the street. The snow was still pristine white, reflecting the moonlight. It looked peaceful. Downstairs, the noise had died down. They were going to sleep, resting up for their big day, their day of liberation. They thought tomorrow was the start of their new life. I checked my burner phone. A text from Silas. They took the bait. They spent the money. They're evicting you tomorrow at 0800 hours. Silas's reply came 10 seconds later. "Perfect. The warrant is being typed up now. Get some rest, Artie. Tomorrow is going to be a show." I put the phone away. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to enjoy the silence of the house one last time before the storm broke. I listened to the muffled sound of their laughter downstairs, the faint clinking of their champagne glasses. They were toasting their victory. They were toasting their cleverness. They were toasting their own funeral. The morning air was crisp and biting, a stark reminder of the bitter winter that had almost claimed me 2 nights ago. I stood on the front porch, my hand gripping the handle of the single black garbage bag that contained the remnants of my life in this house. Serena stood behind me, her hand firmly planted in the middle of my back, applying a steady, insistent pressure. She was literally pushing me out the door. The white van from Maplewood Retirement Center was idling at the curb, its exhaust puffing gray clouds into the clear sky. It looked exactly as I remembered it from the brochure. Industrial, windowless in the back. A vehicle designed for transport, not comfort. "Go on, Arthur," Serena hissed, digging her fingernails into my coat. "The driver is waiting. Don't make a scene." I took a step forward, feigning a stumble. I needed 10 more seconds. Just 10. Victor was standing by the driveway, checking his watch, looking impatiently toward the street as if expecting a parade. He was waiting for Vinny's crew to come and gut the house. He was waiting for his new life to begin. And then the parade arrived. It wasn't the demolition crew. It wasn't a parade of celebration. It was a silent, ominous cavalcade of judgment. 3 regional police cruisers turned the corner in unison. Their lights were silent but blindingly bright in the morning sun, flashing blue and red against the white snow. They screeched to a halt, blocking the driveway, blocking the van, blocking the entire street. Serena froze. Her hand dropped instantly from my back. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice laced with sudden panic. "Why are the police here?" Victor ran toward us, his face instantly pale. "It's security," he stammered, trying desperately to convince himself. "It's for Dad. Because of the lottery, they are here to escort him." I straightened my spine. I dropped the garbage bag. It hit the porch with a soft thud. "No, Victor," I said, my voice clear and strong, shedding the artificial tremor of the senile old man I played for 2 days. "They aren't here for me." The doors of the cruisers opened. 6 uniformed officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters, and from the back of the lead car, Silas Henderson emerged. He wasn't wearing his pajamas this time. He was wearing a dark charcoal trench coat and holding a thick manila envelope that looked exactly like a weapon of mass destruction. He walked up the driveway, his eyes locked on Victor. "Victor Wallace?" Silas asked, his voice booming in the quiet morning. "Serena Wallace?" "Yes," Victor squeaked. "Who are you?" "I am Silas Henderson, attorney at law, representing Mr. Arthur Wallace. And you are under arrest." Serena let out a shriek that sounded like a tearing sheet of metal. "Arrested for what?" "We are his caregivers. We are protecting him." Silas didn't even look at her. He signaled the officers. They moved in, efficient and grim. "You are under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft against a vulnerable senior citizen," Silas recited, ticking the charges off on his fingers, specifically for attempting to transfer $6 million using a fraudulent power of attorney document. "It wasn't fraudulent," Victor yelled as an officer grabbed his wrist. "He signed it. I saw him sign it." Silas smiled, a cold, shark-like baring of teeth. "Yes, he did. He signed it, Arthur Wallace. But his signature card at the bank requires his full legal name, Arthur Daniel Wallace. He left out the middle name on purpose, Victor. And because you were so desperate, because you rushed the paperwork without reading it, you didn't notice. But the bank did. The fraud department flagged the transaction the second you initiated it. The money never moved. It was a sting operation." Victor stopped struggling. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a dawning, horrific realization. You did it on purpose." I looked at him. I looked at the son who had left me in a shelter. "I learned from the best," I said. "But that's not all," Silas continued, stepping onto the porch. "We also have the charge of real estate fraud, attempting to sell a property you do not own. We have audio recordings of you accepting a $50,000 cash deposit from a known criminal associate." Serena gasped. "How? How do you know that?" I pointed to the crown molding above the door. "The bugs, Serena. I heard everything. I heard you call me baggage. I heard you plan to lock me away. I heard you count the money." As the officers clicked the handcuffs onto Serena's wrists, a heavy black sedan pulled up aggressively behind the police cars. It maneuvered onto the snow-covered lawn, crushing the rose bushes. The door opened. Vinny stepped out. He was a large man wearing a camel hair coat and dark sunglasses. He looked at the police. He looked at the house. He looked at Victor in handcuffs. He didn't look scared of the police. He looked intensely angry. He walked right past the officers, who seemed to know exactly who he was and wisely decided not to intervene in a civil dispute. He walked right up to Victor. "Hey, kid," Vinny said, his voice like grinding gravel. "Nice bracelets." "Vinny," Victor whimpered. I, I can explain." "I don't want an explanation," Vinny said calmly. "I see what is happening. You don't own the house. You scammed me. That is fine. The cops can have you for the fraud. I just want my 50 grand back." Victor went limp in the officer's grip. He looked desperately at Serena. Serena was sobbing, looking at the ground. I don't have it," Victor whispered, his voice barely audible. "What did you say?" Vinny leaned closer. "I spent it," Victor cried, tears streaming down his face. "I transferred it last night for the deposit on the Aston Martin and the tickets to Rome. It is gone, Vinny. I thought the bank transfer would clear today." Vinny stared at him. The silence was more terrifying than any threat. He nodded slowly. "You spent my money," Vinny said softly, "on a car you will never drive." He turned to the officers. "Take him away, officers, please. Because if you leave him here with me, there won't be anything left to arrest." Victor screamed as they dragged him toward the cruiser. Serena was hysterical, begging me to help, begging me to tell the officers it was all a mistake. I stood on the porch watching them go. I watched my son being shoved into the back of a police car, creating a scene for the entire neighborhood. I watched the loan shark get back into his sedan, pulling out his phone to make a call that would surely seal Victor's fate behind bars. Silas walked up to me. He handed me the keys to the house. "It is done, Artie," he said. "The house is yours. The money is yours. They are gone." I took the keys. I looked at the empty driveway. "Get the van out of here," I told the driver from Maplewood, who was staring with his mouth open. "I'm not going anywhere." I turned and walked back into my house. It was quiet. The toxic smell of their greed was still faintly in the air, but the winter wind coming through the open door was already blowing it away. I had my home back, but as I closed the door, I knew the silence would take a very long time to get used to. The screaming was the worst part. It wasn't the sirens or the crackle of police radios that filled the morning air. It was the sound of my family disintegrating. As the officers shoved Victor into the back of the first cruiser, he wasn't looking at me with remorse. He was looking at his wife with a hatred so pure it burned. "You did this," he screamed, his face pressed against the glass. "You made me sell it. You made me call Vinny. It was your idea to dump him." Serena being wrestled into the second car by a female officer wasn't going down quietly either. She was kicking at the door, her voice shredding her throat. "You gambling addict. You spent the money. You told me the transfer cleared. I should have left you 7 years ago." I stood on the porch, leaning on my cane, watching the spectacle. The neighbors were all out on their lawns now, clutching coffee mugs, witnessing the public downfall of the people who had spent years looking down on them. It was ugly. It was loud. And it was entirely self-inflicted. They were cannibals finally turning on each other because there was no one else left to eat. As the cruisers pulled away, taking the noise and the toxicity with them, a heavy silence descended on the driveway. I turned my attention to the only person left standing in the wreckage. Ryan was shivering by the front door. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was hugging himself, his face pale, his eyes wide and terrified. He looked at the empty street where his parents had just vanished. Then he looked at me. He looked at the grandfather he had ignored, mocked, and tried to exploit. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice trembling. What happens to me? Are they coming back?" I walked up to him. I didn't offer him a hug. I didn't offer him a coat. I looked him dead in the eye. "They aren't coming back for a long, long time." "Ryan," I said, my voice measured and strong. "Federal fraud charges carry mandatory minimum sentences. Your parents are going to prison." Ryan's knees buckled. He slumped against the doorframe, tears spilling onto his cheeks. But what about the house? What about the money? Who is going to take care of me?" I looked at him. I saw the fear, yes, but underneath it, I still saw the entitlement. He wasn't asking if his parents were okay. He was asking who was going to pay for his life. "There is no house," I said coldly. "This is a crime scene now. It is being seized as evidence in a major fraud investigation. And there is no money for you, Ryan. Not a single dime of the lottery winnings." He stared at me, mouth agape. "But you won. You have $12 million. You promised me a Jaguar." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. I promised you a car when I was playing a part, Ryan. I was testing you. And you failed. You failed every single time. You watched them drop me at a shelter on Christmas Eve, and you didn't say a word. You laughed. You asked if you could have my iPad. You were complicit. Please, he sobbed, grabbing my sleeve. Don't leave me here. I don't want to go into the social services system. Please, Grandpa. I will be good. I promise. I pulled my arm away. I looked at Silas, who was standing by the limo, checking his watch. He nodded at me. The paperwork was ready. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a brochure. It wasn't for a car dealership. It was glossy and deep blue, featuring pictures of young men in uniforms marching in formation. You have two choices, Ryan, I said, holding the brochure up. Option 1. I call Child Protective Services right now. You go into the system. You bounce around foster homes until you are 18. You figure it out on your own. Ryan looked at the brochure, horrified. And option 2. Option 2, I said. I pay for a plane ticket and full tuition to the Falcon Peak Military Academy in Alberta. It is a rigorous boarding school. Strict discipline. No phones, no video games, no cars. You wake up at 5 a.m. You make your bed. You study. You work. You learn how to be a man because your father certainly never taught you. It is the only penny of my money you will ever see. Military school? Ryan cried. No, I can't go there. It's prison. It is an education, I corrected him. It is a chance to scrub the rot out of your soul before it becomes permanent. The car is coming for you in an hour, I said. Decide by then. If you're in the car, you have a future. If you aren't, good luck with the state. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned my back on him. I walked down the steps, past the crushed rose bushes, past the tire tracks of a lone shark, past the ghost of the life I used to live. Silas held the door of the limousine open. Where to, Mr. Wallace? The airport, Silas, I said, sliding into the warm leather interior. I have a luxury apartment in Monaco to look at. And Silas, yes, Artie, burn the deed to this house. Sell it to the city. Bulldoze it. I don't care. Just make sure I never have to see it again. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing out the cold, the sobbing teenager, and the wreckage of my family. The driver put the car in gear. As we pulled away, I didn't look out the rear window. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and looked forward into a future that finally belonged to me. I learned that the coldest winters don't come from the weather. They come from the people who are supposed to keep you warm. For years, I confused sacrifice with love. But to my family, my silence was just permission to take more. The $12 million didn't save me. It simply turned on the lights so I could finally see the rats in the walls. True wealth isn't a lottery ticket. It's the freedom to close the door on those who treat you like an option. If you're holding on to people who only love you when your wallet is open, let go. The silence of an empty house is infinitely better than the noise of betrayal. If you believe that family is earned through respect and not just DNA, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served.